thank you for being here so numerous. This is a challenging title and it has a history. I present myself. I'm Bruno Falissard. I am a child adolescent psychiatrist, and I was 8 years ago. I was the president of IACAPAP, the International Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Allied Profession. And Daniel Fung, who will present after, is the past president of IACAPAP, and we know each other very well. And one day we discussed, and I say, well, Daniel, okay, we are in the framework of the biopsychosocial model, blah, 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 blah. He took my arm and said, yes, okay, Bruno, but we have a biopsychosocial spiritual model. I say, okay. I never noticed that I hadn't this aspect of human being in my model of what is a human being and the patient in psychiatry. And with the organizer, during a dinner, I just mentioned this event to Jörg, and Jörg told me, okay, you are going to do a debate with Daniel about spirituality in child and adolescent psychiatry. And so we are here today. Okay, so I have to disclose first. So I am atheist. I was baptized when I was 3 months. There was no consent. And when I was, so I went to church when I was a child, and it was just normal. And when I was 12, suddenly, in my mind, God does not exist. It was like a rupture in my existence. And anyway, in my family, I was obliged to go to church every Sunday because my father was Catholic, very strict. And so I hated religion as an adolescent. You can imagine, I was obliged to go to church, and I hadn't any faith. And so during a long, I was quite against religion. And because I do research more, and as a scientist, religion was something a little bit strange, not really evidence-based. And with time, and seeing patients more and more, I realized that, in fact, life is more complex than I believed first, and that, indeed, spirituality is something which is important for human being. But I am still atheist, but I understand religion. I have no problem with that, and we will come back to that in more detail. And I mentioned I am French. You know, France is a very lay country, and we have problem with religion. This is important to notice. You know surely that in France, if publicly you mention something about your belief, your religion, your spirituality, it is a little bit as if you showed your sex. You know, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. This is a social injunction. That's life. In some country, you can say, Olayinka, for instance, past president of IACAPAP from Nigeria, during her talk, she should, God, my godfather, etc. When she says that, no, you cannot say that. As a speaker in a congress, you cannot pronounce God. This is not, for us, this is shocking. Anyway, because I made progress about that, recently we did a work with the French Society about structuring the French healthcare system, and in the text, I wrote that I knew that it was supposed to be a little bit provocative. I wrote, child and adolescent psychiatric care is provided by a professional with his or her own experience, training, theoretical, and even spiritual reference concerning the nature of human psyche. This background must be respected for ethical reasons, to preserve the meaning that professionals find in their work, for reason of effectiveness, to promote the therapeutic alliance, and finally, for reason of attractiveness of the protection. And why not? This is not shocking, I'm sure, for you. And many of my colleagues say, you wrote spiritual, this is not possible. And even a representative of family of patient told me, why did you wrote that? This is absolutely unbelievable. So you can see the tension that exists about this question. So why such a scandal? Why such a scandal? While if you mention psychiatry, in psychiatry there is psy. And psyche is very close to spirituality, etymologically. Of course, you will tell me, but how do you define spirituality? Daniel, with more detail about that. Anyway, you know that it is difficult to define spirituality. It depends on the country, on the culture, etc., and it is the symptoms at this. Anyway, about spirituality, there is the fact that, it is an anthropologist, Philippe Descola, who shows that all human beings have an interiority and a physicality. This is a universal of human being. We know that we have a body with bones, etc., and like animals, and but we have also something that we feel is inside ourselves, and he calls that interiority. And in some culture, they call that soul. And there is a question: what is soul? What happens with soul once we are dead? Etc., etc. And there is, of course, religion. You know the etymology of religion? It is religere, it is a link between people. And we will come back to that. I think there is something very strong about that. Human beings in a community feel that they are related to each other. And we form a community, and religion are working with that. Anyway, some of us have faith, and faith, there are studies, epidemiological studies about faith, and when you have faith, it is a protection against suicide, and it is a protection against addiction, and all religions have not the same efficacy. It is highly reproducible, and so for us, just being a scientist, it is obviously an object that should be studied because it works. And even in clinical practice, from time to time, I have some patients that are doing the Ramadan. You know what it is, the Ramadan? So they say, I'm doing it. Do you do the Ramadan? And the parents say, shh, don't speak about that. The professor, no, you see. And so the child don't understand why we cannot discuss about Ramadan. And so I am obliged to say, okay, not me. And but why don't you? It's not so easy. For me, this is not so easy because the society does not allow me that much to enter in a discussion about religion with my patient. Because we are not supposed to do that. So it's a problem. And there is also, I was in Egypt a couple of years ago discussing with a colleague, child adolescent psychiatrist, and who do psychotherapies. She is Muslim, but she doesn't wear a headscarf. She is with her hair. And she told me, when I do therapies, I had to wear a headscarf because it works better. In the therapeutic alliance. And so you can say this is crazy, she can wear what she wants, but this is our job, to engage in a therapeutic alliance so that the therapy works well. And if it works well with a headscarf, go. And so you see, but in my university, we never discuss that. And in addition, if you are a public health professional, you cannot wear a headscarf in France. This is forbidden because you show your religion, and if you show your religion and you belong to the public service, This is impossible. This is a social injection. And so, you see, the question is not so easy, and it is important. And so, there is a tension between social injunction and clinical reality. And so, we have to deal with that. And I would say that behind this tension, there is another tension between science and spirituality. Why? Because if we are child and adolescent psychiatrists, we have to deal our practice on science. Our treatment have to be evidence-based. While spirituality traditionally is not close to science. And so there is an epistemological tension. And during the 10 minutes that I have, I would like to deal with this epistemological tension so that we can go through this paradox. And so now we are going to take a step back and to come to a mathematician and philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, a British guy, who wrote a book, Science and the Modern World, in 1925. And this is really something crucial to understand our world and our science. He says that during the 17th century, Galileo, Newton, Descartes, so you know, big words in modern science, he said that there is a principle that is a basement of this science of nature, which is a principle of simple location. What does it mean? It means that in our universe, there is a reality, a physical reality that we can touch, and this reality is made of objects that exist at a specific, isolated point in space and time, independent of its relationships to anything else. It means it seems to be very simple. Very simple. And why? Because what does it mean? It means that matter is made by atoms, and atoms you have proton, neutron, electron, like that, and they are little things that are isolated from each other and interact with gravity, etc., etc. You all learn that in school, and for you, this is reality. And after these atoms, aggregate themselves, and you know that this is a cell with a nucleus, mitochondria, etc., etc., which are little things independent to each other and which interact. And then after, these cells are aggregated in organs, the liver, the lung, etc., that are clear and distinct and that communicate between each other. And in our brain, you have neurons that are little things distinct to each other, that communicate to each other. And so, life is like that. Reality is like that, and this is true. And in fact, this is not so sure. This is not so sure. And Whitehead said, be careful. And he calls that the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. He said, no. What I presented to you, this is an abstract model of reality. This is an abstract model, but in fact, it is not sufficient enough to describe the actual richness of experience of a human being. But it is a powerful conditioning. A powerful conditioning, and I am sure that many of you are asking to themselves, but what is it talking about? Why reality is like that, and what does it mean by that? Just that. It is supposed to be Victor Hugo. When his daughter died, he said, you are no longer where you were because she passed away, but you are everywhere where I am. And I'm sure you know that this is true, but because unfortunately many of you lost somebody, and you know that during months you feel that the person that is no more here, she or he is still here. And in fact, there is no simple location of thinking subjects. In fact, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, etc., in fact, he is or she is a little bit in you, and you are a little bit in his or in her. And this is just reality. Because when he or she is not here, a piece of you is lacking. And this is, of course, this is the same for children. So there is no simple location with thinking subject, and so natural science, obeying to the simple location principle, does not work to understand the richness of thinking subject. And curiously, in physics, they have at the moment exactly the same problem with quantum entanglement. This is the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2014 or something like that. You know that in quantum physics, you can have two particles that you create them at the same place, and they are in the same condition, and you put them away, billions of kilometers, and when you measure the state of one, immediately the other knows what is the state of the other immediately. They are still connected. And so physicists try to develop theories that don't obey the principle of simple location. And this is very funny what they say about that. They say that when they develop this theory, non-local theory, their colleagues don't believe them, don't accept their theory. And why? This is just a psychological thing. You know, this is David Bohm, a physicist. He said, for in the early period of the development of science, there was a long struggle to get free from what may from what may perhaps have been regarded as superstition and magical notions, in which non-locality clearly played a key part. Perhaps has remained a deep fear that the mere consideration of non-locality might reopen the floodgates for what are felt to be irrational thoughts. This is very relevant, you know. When I say to you, we are connected, and there is perhaps after this session, there will be a little part of me that will be inside you. You will say he's romantic. This is not serious. You know, this is not serious. While this is serious. This is how things works. But if we say no, this cannot be scientific, and why we say this cannot be scientific? Because of the principle of simple location, which is a conditioning of what we believe to be science. And for scientists at the moment, they say that this model is not true, and in fact, this should be the model of interaction between particles. They are still connected. And interestingly, you know, perhaps John Hopfield has the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2024. And John Hopfield had his Nobel Prize for mainly one paper published in 1982 on deep learning, on neural network. And it showed that, in fact, when you have a neural network, you can represent what we call mind as that attractor with the geometry, and the human brain, the human mind can be represented by something like that. You know, when you have deep things, this corresponds to your mental state. So you can have your dog, your cat, your car, your house, your friend, etc., and billion of things like that. And so, in fact, your car can be inside you, and etc. And in fact, there is, and each of us has a certain representation of all our mental state that, and there can be an intrication between all our mental states, and this is completely scientific. This is a geometrical model of human mind that comes from neural network. This is not fantasy, this is not romanticism, this is theoretical physics. So I arrive to the conclusion, spirituality is not anti-scientific. If you believe that we are all connected, that there is a link between each other, religere, science can explain that. There is no problem about that. Don't be afraid. No need to split going to church on Sunday and being scientists the rest of the week. No problem with that. But natural science are not compatible with design, by design with spirituality. This is the main problem. This is just that natural science by design are not compatible with spirituality. And so we have to do research to tackle this question. And we should do research to tackle the question of spirituality, theoretical research, applied research, clinical research, because it is important for the clinic, because there are very practical questions. For me in France, I have societal injunction not to deal with spirituality, but is it rational in the meaning that I lose a certain effect in my psychological treatment? And what about the negligence of valuable patient facet? If my patient have a faith, I should discuss about that with them. Of course, it belongs to their life. And so we have to discuss about that. Of course, there is also the question of therapist's privacy, which is, as you know, a very general question about my sexual orientation, etc., etc. This is my privacy. And so there is, I can have a religion too. And so is it private? To what extent, if I speak about religion with my patient or parents of patient, to what extent I am obliged to discuss about my faith, etc. This is an open question. I have no answer. And I think it depends on the country, on the culture where you live. And I think now it will be up to Daniel to do his presentation. Thank you.